My name is Silverlock, and as you could probably guess from my online moniker, I've always had a special place in my heart for the second generation of Pokemon games. Pokémon Silver was the very first game I ever owned, and it marked the beginning of my lifelong love of the series. The Generation 4 remakes, Heart Gold and Soul Silver, improved the originals in almost every way. So today, I'll be taking on a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon SoulSilver using only Generation 2 Pokémon. Along with the typical hardcore rules, the first encounter I find in each area must be part of a Generation 2 evolutionary line. This includes any Gen 1 Pokémon that evolved into Gen 2 Pokémon, with the caveat that they must evolve at the earliest opportunity that's provided. We start the run by choosing our starter, and of course, I have to go with Cyndaquil, my absolute favorite starter of the entire series. It's the very first Pokemon I ever picked as a kid, so there was never any doubt who I'd be choosing. And not only that, this particular Cyndaquil ends up being female, which along with all the other starters is only a 12.5 chance of happening. That's pretty cool. I name her Amber, and with her in tow, our nostalgia-filled adventure can officially begin. After meeting with Professor Oak to get our Pokedex, and giving our rival a thoughtful and respectful name, I finally received my first set of Pokeballs to start building the team. Since it's nighttime when I began this run, I end up missing out on the adorable Sentret on Route 29, so I'm forced to grab a Hoothoon instead, who I name Sienna. When I pick the game back up in the morning, I can grab a Ledyba on Route 30 and name him Rusty. But a modest nature means those 6 punching glove arms aren't going to reach their full potential. Sorry, bud. Next I catch Iris, the Zubat, in the Dark Cave, and even with a speed-reducing quiet nature, she'll still be fast as hell once fully evolved, a trait that will make her extremely useful throughout the run. After that, we finally arrive in Violet City, but we're still not done drafting our starting team. In the Pokemon Center, there's an NPC named Primo, who can give us one of 3 different eggs by entering the correct password combination, which is based on your trainer ID. With that, you can either get a Wooper, Mareep, or Slugma, and while Slugma is an encounter you can't normally get until much later in the game, it's still the worst option for multiple reasons. So I decide to get the Mareep egg, and name her Goldie once she hatches in the Sprout Tower. Then last but not least, in the little patch of accessible grass on Route 32, I find a Wooper and name him Cyan. And just like that, I have a fully stacked team in time for the first gym battle against Falkner. We don't necessarily need everyone for this fight, but it's good insurance, especially after Sienna starts by missing 3 Hypnosis in a row. This lets Falkner's Pidgey tackle her below half, but thankfully the 4th attempt finally puts her to sleep, letting me swap to Goldie safely. Which ends up not mattering since Pidgey ends up waking up immediately. But another tackle ends up activating Goldie's static ability, and a single Thundershock finishes it off. Falkner's Ace Pidgeotto comes out next, and at this point I realize that Hypnosis strat was completely pointless, because Pidgeotto also gets paralyzed right away. So after a couple more Thundershocks, Pidgeotto goes down, giving us an easy first gym victory. Afterwards, I pick up the egg from Dr. Elm's assistant, and after running around town for a bit, it hatches into Togepi, who I named Vanilla. Then on our way to Azalea Town, Amber evolves into Quilava, then Goldie evolves into Flaffy. Then once we make it out of Union Cave, I deliberately skip the grass on Route 33, for a good reason that I'll explain later. First things first, we have to make it past Bugsy and his bug types. He opens with his Scyther using Focus Energy, while Goldie paralyzes him with a Thunder Wave. She can then outspeed the next turn to deal a bit over a third with Thunder Shock, but Scyther breaks through Paralysis to get off a strong U-turn. He pivots to Metapod, which quickly goes down after a couple wing attacks from Iris. Then Scyther returns and tries to go for Quick Attack, but it ends up getting fully paralyzed instead. Another wing attack brings it into the red and activates its health Citrus Berry. Not that it really matters, since Scyther ends up getting fully paralyzed again on the next turn, allowing Iris to finish it off with another wing attack. Last is Kakuna, who might as well just forfeit on the spot. 2 wing attacks later, and that's another easy gym badge acquired. The next fight against our rival goes smoothly as well. Vanilla takes out his Ghastly with an extra sensory, then uses Charm to lower Croconaws' attack, although all it does is try to lower our speed with Scary Face. So I go for Yawn, putting it to sleep on the following turn, and giving Goldie a chance to come in. This time the sleep actually sticks, which lets Goldie take Croconaw down with a few Thundershocks, then finish off Zubat with a couple more. And after helping catch the Farfetch'd in Ilex Forest, I head back and grab the Charcoal to help power up Amber's Fire-type attacks, and as I return to the forest, I go ahead and catch an Oddish I named Teal, who turns out to have an adamant nature. Not really what I'm looking for in a potential Blossom. At the very least, he ends up being our first designated cutter, which lets us reach the Headbutt tutor. I teach it to a few of my Pokemon, then I U-turn back to Route 33. And because I intentionally ignored the patch of grass here earlier, we now have a guaranteed Heracross encounter. Because both Aipom and Heracross can appear by headbutting in certain trees on Route 33 and in Azalea Town, if I were to catch a Hoppip on Route 33, the odds of getting a Heracross would have become 50-50 instead. So because I catch Indigo the Aipom on Route 33, this ensures, based on my rule set, that Heracross is a guaranteed encounter in Azalea Town. Cobalt the Brave joins the team, giving us an early game powerhouse and a near-perfect answer for the next gym battle coming up. But since this is Whitney we're talking about, we'll still need some backup to ensure we don't lose any team members. So after I arrive in Goldenrod City, I immediately hit the game corner and play a lot of Voltorb Flip, which nets us some pretty powerful TMs for this stage of the game. Flamethrower for Amber, Thunderbolt for Goldie, and Swords Dance for Cobalt. Which is what I have him open with to start the fight against Whitney's Clefairy, and while he does end up taking all 5 hits from a double slap, the attack boost puts him in prime condition to take out not only Clefairy in a single hit, but also her Miltank. And the one single thing that could go wrong, has of course gone wrong. Thank you, Murphy's Law. Because Cobalt had the misfortune of being assigned a male at birth, he gets completely immobilized by a track 2 turns in a row, allowing Whitney's Miltank to stomp him down to just 5 HP. Lovely. So I have no choice but to switch to Goldie, hoping things don't start snowballing, as Miltank starts her rollout. I go for Thunder Wave to use up her held Lumberry, with the hope that a second Thunder Wave the next turn will give us a chance to cut the rollout off early. But the second rollout hit activates her static ability. That's the lucky break we needed. I use Growl the next turn to lower her attack before she starts another rollout, which still deals some solid damage, enough to activate Goldie's Oranberry. But then Miltank gets fully paralyzed the following turn, giving me the opportunity to bring in Amber. And now that she's armed with her new Flamethrower, she just needs 2 hits to finally take Miltank down, averting a potential disaster, and winning us our 3rd badge. Sorry, Whitney, it's either I cry or you cry. No in between. We survived our hardest challenge yet, but now we get access to a whole slew of new encounters on the way to the next gym. First, I enter the bug catching contest at the national park to hunt for a Scyther, who I named Jasper. I don't end up winning the contest though, losing to a freaking Metapod of all things. I always thought the contest was rigged way back in the original games, and this definitely doesn't change my mind. Back on Route 34, I headbutt a tree and grab a Pineco I name Argent. Then I catch the Sudowoodo blocking the way on Route 36, who I name Russet, followed by Khaki the Stantler on Route 37. And once I arrive in Ecruteak City, I head over to the pond to fish up a Poliwag I name Lime, whose jolly nature is a bit of a mixed bag. It'll definitely help Lime possibly outspeed more opponents, but at the cost of his more usable special attack. After meeting Bill in the Pokemon Center, I can backtrack to Goldenrod City to pick up a Eevee, who I named Vanta. Based on the name I gave him, I decided to evolve him into Umbreon, which is my favorite evolution. It's also one of my favorite Pokemon to use in a Nuzlocke run in general, but only in the later generations. Umbreon's move pool in this game is painfully underwhelming, so I'm not sure how much use he'll realistically see. The same goes for Vanilla, who finally evolves into Togetic, but with the Shiny Stone being locked until I acquire all 16 badges from Johto and Kanto, we won't be seeing a fully evolved Togekiss anytime soon. A good example of the weird gatekeeping Game Freak decided to do with the remake. In contrast, Iris is now happy enough to evolve straight into Crobat just one level after evolving into Golbat. And after another easy win against our rival in the Burnt Tower, Iris completely steals the show against Morty by sweeping his entire team on her own. His Ghastly and both Haunters go down to a single bite each, and even though his Gengar can survive one and heal with a Citrus Berry, Iris just lands a critical hit the very next turn, and earns us our 4th badge. Way too easy. After that, Lime can evolve into Poliwhirl, and while the King's Rock and the Slowpoke well is technically reachable at this point, I decide to save it for a particular encounter later on. Instead, I decide to grind points at the Pokeathlon, which can be traded in not only for a King's Rock to evolve Lime into Politoed, but also a Metal Coat, allowing Jasper to evolve into Scizor. And along with Goldie fully evolving into Ampharos, I can safely say that I have a pretty stacked team, and we're only halfway through the Johto region. It's so stacked, in fact, that our streak of dominating gym battles just continues against Chuck and his fighting types. Jasper completely annihilates his Primeape with a super effective, technician-boosted critical hit wing attack. And after a decently strong surf from his Poliwrath, Jasper just needs to land a few more wing attacks that end up using up his Citrus Berry and Chuck's Hyper Potion. And thanks to a Helchesto Berry that wakes Jasper up after Hypnosis, he can easily hang on and land one more wing attack, giving us another commanding gym victory. And now that we're able to use Fly, it becomes much easier to revisit earlier areas to pick up some new encounters and items. First, I head back to Cherry Grove City to pick up the Mystic Water that will help boost Lime's water-type attacks. Then I pick up the Good Rod to fish up a Chinchou on Route 41, who I name Brandeis. Next, I delve back into the Slowpoke well to finally pick up a Slowpoke. And since this is also where we can pick up the King's Rock, she can immediately evolve into Slowking. She also happens to come with a useful Calm nature, boosting her already great special defense, so she more than earns a spot in the team rotation. I then make my way to the Ruins of Alth through the Union Cave, where I can either find a Smeargle or Natu. I end up catching Malachite the Natu, and while I'm considering adding her to the rotation after evolving, I then remember that Xatu's move pool in the 4th generation is bad. Very bad. Sorry, Malachite. Into the box you go. I don't have much room for Jasmine the Giraffe Egg either, but that's just because my current team has been handling everything pretty well so far. And after we rip through the Team Rocket hideout with ease, we can move forward to taking on Price and his ice types. His Seal drops to a single Thunderbolt from Goldie, then I switch over to Cobalt to take on Piloswine, who sets up Hail, activating his Snow Cloak ability. But Cobalt doesn't care. He takes a Hail-boosted Blizzard, then manages to connect with a couple Brick Breaks to take it down. Then for Dugong, I switch to Jasper, who easily takes multiple Aurora Beams, before taking it out with a couple Technician-boosted Rock Smashes, winning us another badge. And shortly after that, we fly back to Olivine City to finally take on Jasmine. This time it's Amber, still not fully evolved, who steals the show by completely melting down Jasmine's team with just a few flamethrowers. But now we get to finally take a break from thrashing the Johto gyms to deal with Team Rocket. But before heading over to the radio tower, I stop by the game corner again to grind out more coins to buy a couple Ice Beam TMs and a wide lens, both of which will be very useful later. And after Amber finally evolves into Typhlosion as we make our way up the tower, we have to go up against Petrol and his team of trigger-happy Coughings, who all know self-destruct. This fight can be a nightmare unless you have a way to take them out in a single hit, but Lime the Politoed comes with the Damp ability, which completely prevents explosion moves. How convenient. After she takes them down by spamming Surf, as well as a forgettable fight against our rival in the underground, we make our way back to the top of the tower, where Lime and Amber team up to take down Archer and stop Team Rocket's resurgence. It's just another typical day in the life of a Pokemon protagonist. And with that annoying distraction out of the way, we can move forward towards getting our 8th badge. First, I make a pit stop back at the Lake of Rage to pick up the Choice Specs, a pretty powerful item to have at this point of the game. Then on Route 44, I catch Verity the Tangela, who I immediately evolve into Tangrowth, a Pokemon I have never used before in any playthrough. But then I realize that a Grass type at this point of the game is not very useful. What is useful though, is picking up an Ice type just in time for the fight against Clair and her Dragon types, and Russet the Swinub fits the bill perfectly. Just don't pay attention to the fact that I already named my Sudowoodo Russet. After we make it through the Ice Path and into Blackthorn City, I immediately keep moving to Route 45, hoping to find a Skarmory, but instead my first encounter there ends up being a Teddy Ursa. Ugh, what a bummer. So Sandy goes immediately into the box, while Russet fully evolves into Mamoswine after learning Ancient Power. I also have Jasper learn Bullet Punch from the Movie Learner, which gives him a powerful stab, Technician boostable priority move to cover for his low speed. And with that, we're set to take on Clair. Her Gyarados opens with a Dragon Rage against Goldie, but it naturally goes down to a single quad-effective Thunderbolt. Her first Dragonair comes out next, and a Dragon Pulse brings Goldie below half, but she easily hangs on to paralyze it with a Thunder Wave. With the speed drop, I predict Dragonair will go for its own Thunder Wave to gain the advantage, so I switch over to Russet to negate it. It fights through Paralysis again to land an Aqua Tail that does a little over a third, but a full-powered Avalanche takes it out in one clean hit. This prompts Clair to send out her ace Kingdra, so Russet has to switch out or else be destroyed by a Hydro Pump. I bring in Lime, who tanks said Hydro Pump and a Dragon Pulse before she gets a chance to miss a Hypnosis. Not unexpected, but still disappointing. So we have to switch again, this time into Rose, who tanks another Dragon Pulse. Kingdra goes for a Smokescreen on the next turn, but Rose manages to land a Yawn. I then switch to Cobalt, who has to take another Smokescreen before Kingdra finally falls asleep. Cobalt now has a chance to set up the Swords Dance, and then land a close combat the next turn, taking Clair's biggest threat down in a single boosted hit. All that's left is their second Dragonair, so I switch to Jasper, and I know at this point that this is the Dragonair that carries Fire Blast. It uses Thunder Wave on the switch-in, so I pivot right back to Rose, who tanks the Fire Blast like it's nothing. It does paralyze Rose with another Thunder Wave, but I had her hold a Cherry Berry to heal it right away. With that taken care of, Rose just needs to fire off a couple Ice Beams to finally take it down, winning us our 8th and sort of final badge. But before we can move forward, we have a few loose ends to attend to, the first of which is the Kimono Girl Gauntlet. But with Jasper leading the team and packing Bullet Punch and U-Turn with a held Shell Bell for healing, being unable to switch out between battles isn't an issue. And on the way to the Whirl Islands to confront Lugia, I go ahead and catch a Miltank on Route 47 and name her Magenta. Then while we're in the caves, I fish up a Horsey I name Azure, but at this point my team has pretty much everything covered, but having backup never hurts. And after Lime and Goldie successfully tag team to take down Lugia, we can now make our way toward the Kanto region to take on the Elite Four, but not before facing our rival at the end of Victory Road. Jasper starts by annihilating his Sneasel with a super effective Bullet Punch. I then keep him in against Feraligatr to get off a slow U-turn, letting Goldie come in for free. But then she ends up getting flinched from a waterfall the next turn, and after that a slash brings Goldie below half, but it activates Static, something that would have been a bit more useful a couple turns earlier. Either way, Goldie finally lands a Thunderbolt to take Feraligatr down, and Haunter comes in next. And this is where I end up making a string of mistakes. First I switch to Iris, who gets immediately confused from a Confuse Ray. I decide to gamble and keep her in, but then she ends up hurting herself in the next turn. Haunter then uses Curse, and this is the point where I really should have switched her out. But I decide to take another chance keeping her in, and she ends up hurting herself a second time. And then Haunter follows up with Mean Look, trapping Iris in. So after another round of curse damage, Iris is now in a very bad situation. With nothing else I can do, I go for a bite one more time, hoping for the best. Yeah, I really can't call it bad luck. I had enough opportunities to switch Iris out before it got to this point. Because of how relatively easy the run had been so far, I think I got a bit complacent. And because of that, we finally suffer our first death of the run. I bring in Amber, who proceeds to completely finish off the rest of his team on her own by spamming Flamethrower, but despite the win, we've lost our fastest team member right before the Elite Four, where having a speed advantage really matters. But as I recompose my team, I'm fairly confident that what I have can take on the challenge. So, nothing left to do but move forward and hope for the best. Will is up first, and I lead with Goldie against his first Xatu. It tries to be sneaky by using me first to copy Goldie's Thunderbolt, but naturally it doesn't do much, and Goldie's own Thunderbolt just takes it out in one hit. Next is Jinx, who misses a Lovely Kiss as Goldie sets up a light screen. I switch to Jasper, but the next Lovely Kiss connects and puts him to sleep. I decide to keep him in for a couple of turns, letting the light screens do its job, and on the third turn, Jasper finally wakes up and lands a super effective Bullet Punch, getting us another one-hit KO. Executor comes out next and sets up a Reflect, but a U-turn from Jasper scores a critical hit and just straight up takes it out. I then bring Goldie back in, and at this point, Will is already out of viable options. His Slowbro goes down with another Goldie branded Thunderbolts, and the same goes for his second Xatu. That's one down. Next up is Koga, and I have Amber take the lead, immediately roasting his Ariados and Fortress with a couple flamethrowers. Another flamethrower does about half to Muck, who ends up using Minimize while healing with its Black Sludge. I'm not going to play around with the evasion shenanigans, so I pivot to Jasper, who negates a Gunk Shot coming in. And since that's the only attacking move it knows, it's reduced to just spamming Screech, letting Jasper safely connect with a couple Bullet Punches to take it down. Next up is Crobat, and another Bullet Punch does about a third, but then it goes for Double Team, causing the next one to miss. It then uses Wing Attack, which ends up doing some decent damage thanks to the earlier Screeches lowering his defense. So I switch over to Russet, who tanks 2 more Wing Attacks, but his first Avalanche ends up missing. I then try Ice Shard, but that also misses, because of course it did. Another Wing Attack brings Russet below half, and at this point I'm risking a critical hit possibly taking him down, but I go ahead and take one last shot. He takes another Wing Attack, and survives, and this Avalanche finally connects, taking Crobat down. Koga's biggest threat is out, but we still have his Venomoth left to deal with. I pivot over to Rose, who gets barely a tickle from a resisted Psychic, It goes for Toxic the next turn, but Rose can easily hold on and take it down with just a couple of power gems. And with that win, Rose can level up and finally learn Psychic herself, just in time for our next fight against Bruno. His Hitmontop dodges the first Psychic with Dig, but can't do much after it pops back out, going down in one hit. But because Hitmonchan can threaten with Thunder Punch, I decided to play it safe by switching to Goldie, who can resist it. She tanks an Ice Punch on the next turn, and after a Thunder Wave paralyzes, I switch again to Amber. Hitmonchan then gets fully paralyzed, allowing her to come in safely, then connect with a Flamethrower that brings him below half. He does land a Thunder Punch afterwards, but just one more Flamethrower easily finishes him off. Next is Onyx, who sets up a Sandstorm as I bring in Lime. A Surf deletes it instantly, and just like that, we're staring down Bruno's ace, Machamp. A Choice Specs boosted Surf barely manages to bring him just below half, enough to activate its held Citrus Berry. And a Cross Chop and Sandstorm damage brings Lime down to about 44 HP, so I have to bring Rose back in. She tanks a weak Revenge, then after a Rock Slide thankfully doesn't flinch, a Psychic can finish it off, leaving his Hitmonlee to deal with. It tries to do something with Swagger, but Rose powers through the confusion, landing another Psychic for another one-hit KO, giving us our third Elite Four win. Karen is next, who can be a bit tricky to deal with thanks to her more varied team. I start with Amber taking on her Umbreon, opening with a track that causes it to immediately be immobilized. This gives us more chances to land an inaccurate Focus Blast, but we're lucky enough that the first one hits, bringing Umbreon down to a third. Our luck continues as Umbreon gets immobilized by Love again, letting Amber finish him off with a Flamethrower the next turn. Murkrow is next, so I bring in Goldie to resist a Pluck and paralyze it with Static. Goldie uses the opportunity to outspeed and set up a Light Screen, and after a weak Feint attack, a Thunderbolt takes it down. Our Light Screen pays off immediately as Karen sends out Houndoom. With the screen up, the AI probably senses that a Crunch would be more effective, and while it brings Goldie down to below a third, her Static ability comes in clutch again. We do end up wasting her turn of trying to use a Thunder Wave, but that's not a huge deal. I switch to Lime, who takes a Crunch coming in, but she can outspeed the next turn to take Houndoom out with a single Surf. This baits in Karen's Vileplume next, so it's back to Amber, who I hoped would tank a Giga Drain, but Vileplume ends up going for a Stun Spore instead. But I expected this, which is why I had Amber hold a Lunberry. The paralysis clears up, and on the next turn, a Flamethrower completely cooks Vileplume to a crisp. Last up is Gengar, who could potentially cause some trouble. I even the odds a bit by going for a Smokescreen to lower its accuracy, and it works perfectly, causing its Focus Blast to miss. And after a second Smokescreen, Gengar's chances of landing anything are nearly gone. It tries to go for a Spite and a second Focus Blast after a Flamethrower brings it below half, but now we have a problem. Gengar knows Destiny Bond. Knocking it out with Destiny Bond being active would also knock out its attacker, a nightmare scenario for any Nuzlocker. So to play it super safe, I switch to Rose, who tanks a Lick on the next turn and lands a Yawn. And because we didn't knock down Gengar's HP into full restore range, I can bring in Jasper as Gengar goes to sleep, then safely let loose a Bullet Punch to finish it off, safely winning us our final Elite Four victory. But now we're finally down to the champion Lance, who has 3 underleveled Dragonites he Game Sharked in for us to contend with. Goldie starts off by holding a Choice Scarf, allowing her to immediately outspeed and take Gyarados down with a single Thunderbolt. And as if he senses the oncoming danger, Lance immediately sends out his Ace level 50 Dragonite, my team's biggest threat. So, it's now or never. I keep Goldie in to at least get some chip in with a neutral hitting Thunderbolt, expecting her to survive at least one hit, but that doesn't happen, because Thunderbolt ends up paralyzing. And with perfect timing, Dragonite proceeds to get completely paralyzed 2 turns in a row, letting me safely switch to Rose and fire off a quad-effective Ice Beam. Just like that, Lance's ace is already down. Of course, we still have his other 2 Dragonites to contend with. His second comes in next, but having Rose in easily baits it into using Thunder Wave, so I can pivot to Russet to effortlessly negate it. Then on the next turn it misses a Dragon Rush, allowing an Avalanche to take it down in a single hit. Charizard comes out next, so I bring in Lime, and after surviving a Fire Fang and Air Slash, lets off a Choice Specs boosted Surf to get us another one-hit KO. Next up is Lance's final Dragonite, and since Lime is locked into Surf, I have to switch back to Russet. The next Dragon Rush does connect this time, but Russet manages to just barely stay above half health. I risk a crit or higher damage roll by keeping him in, but I have to take this chance to get off an Ice Shard, which ends up leaving Dragonite with what must be a fifth of its HP. It goes for another Dragon Rush, but this one misses. Another Ice Shard finishes off Lance's last Dragonite, and now we're down to his final Pokemon, Aerodactyl. And because I have one more team member that hasn't seen action yet, I decide to bring in Jasper to have some fun. He survives a rock slide coming in, and all he has to do is land a super effective bullet punch to net us another one-hit KO, and give us a deathless win against the Elite Four and Champion. With that, we're officially inducted into the Hall of Fame, and the credits roll. But since this is a Gen 2 remake, we're still far from done with this playthrough. There are still 8 more badges to collect, and a true final boss to take on. So with that, it's time to hop on the ship to Vermilion City as we begin our sweep of the Kanto gyms. Most of them are pretty straightforward compared to the Elite Four, so this section ends up being more of a showcase of my team's abilities than anything else. Ressa completely sweeps Lieutenant Surge with multiple earthquakes, and Vanta briefly returns to take on Sabrina's psychic types, with Jasper helping take care of her Alakazam. Goldie nearly sweeps Misty, except for her electric immune Quagsire, which is taken down by Cobalt. Then Amber ends up serving Barbecue using the vegetables from Erica's garden. Ironically, Janine's underlevel team forces me to use more than 2 of my Pokemon, but regardless, she too falls easily. Cobalt breaks Brock's rock types, and Lime wonders why Blaine moved his team of fire types to an island surrounded by water. That's some Groudon level logic right there. And just like that, we're down to the final gym leader, Blue. But unlike the others, his team is much more champion-coded, so he'll require some actual strategy. The battle starts with Cobalt taking out his Exeggutor with a single Mega Horn, then a single Thunderbolt knocks down his Pidgeot. Rhydon comes out next, and this guy can hit my entire team hard no matter what. I bring Cobalt back in to resist an Earthquake, then I go for a close combat the next turn, but it survives on what has to be a single hit point. His held Shell Bell nearly heals him back to full health, but because of the defense drop from close combat, Rhydon's Stone Edge connects and takes Cobalt down, giving us our second death of the run. I don't think there is much I can do there. Sometimes the damage roll you need is razor thin, and they just don't go your way. But it definitely hurts to lose a powerful team member this late in the run. Regardless, Line comes in and finishes off Rhydon with a Surf after Blue uses his full restore, and Machamp is next. I switch to Jasper, who could take another Stone Edge pretty well, but then Machamp outspeeds and lands a Dynamic Punch that brings Jasper down to just 38 HP and confuses. But thankfully, he manages to fight the confusion to land a super effective wing attack that gets the one-hit KO. This brings out Arcanine, so I switch to Rose, who easily tanks a couple Flare Blitzes before retaliating with a Surf to take it down. That just leaves Gyarados, who tries to set up with Dragon Dance, but a yawn eventually puts it to sleep after I switch back to Goldie. She has to tank a boosted return, but survives to fire off a Thunderbolt the following turn to earn us our 16th and final badge. We're finally down to the last challenge of the game, ascending Mount Silver to take on Red. While assembling my final team, I realized that Russet, despite being my only Mon able to resist the permanent hail at the peak, is weak to 4 of Red's Pokemon, and would almost certainly be a liability. So I make the tough call to leave him out. Instead, I decide to bring back Vanilla to replace him. And with the Rock Climb HM you get from Professor Oak after acquiring all 16 badges, I can then return to the National Park in Johto to find the shiny stone needed to evolve him into Togekiss. And with that, my final team is assembled. Unlike my previous runs of other games, my team makeup has been pretty consistent throughout. I was able to build a pretty strong roster early on, so now it's time to see if they can finish the run strong. Amber sets the tone immediately by annihilating Red's Pikachu with a full-powered eruption. Blastoise comes out next, so I switch to Rose, who resists a Focus Blast coming in. It misses with the next one, as Rose goes for a yawn while her held leftovers keeps up with a Hail Chip. I go for Protect the next turn to stall before Blastoise falls asleep, allowing Rose to use Dream Eater the next turn. It brings Blastoise below half, but it ends up waking up right away, causing her second Dream Eater to miss, only for Blastoise to miss another Focus Blast. At this point, I pivot to a different plan. Rather than reapplying sleep, I go for a Resisted Surf instead. I do this deliberately so that Red uses up one of his full restores early. On the turn he heals, I restart the cycle by going for another yawn and protecting the next turn. Blastoise falls asleep again, and this time he stays asleep long enough for Rose to take him down with a couple more Dream Eaters. Thanks to that, Rose is back to full health as Venusaur comes in. I switch to Vanilla, who tanks a Giga Drain, but Venusaur is faster, and he lands a Sleep Powder to put Vanilla to sleep on the next turn. A couple of Sludge Bombs and Hail damage bring him down to the red, but he manages to wake up in time to heal with Roost. I'm hoping that another Sleep Powder will miss, but this one doesn't. I continue to draw things out by keeping Vanilla in and hope he shakes off the sleep again, but it just wasn't meant to be. I brought him back to the team, just to become dead weight for the final fight. So I bring in Amber to take on Venusaur instead, probably the better move from the start. After a strong Sludge Bomb brings her below half, a Flamethrower is all it takes to finish him off. Lapras is next, and now it's Goldie's turn. She takes a Brine on the switch, then a Thunderbolt brings Lapras down to about a quarter HP. The same happens to Goldie after a Hail-boosted Blizzard, but one more Thunderbolt is more than enough to take Lapras down. Next is Snorlax, and I make the decision to bring Vanilla back in, who's still asleep. He's holding a Yachi Berry, so Snorlax Blizzard doesn't take him down right away. After hail damage, Vanilla is left with just 11 HP. I make the hard decision and give him one more chance to wake up and heal with Roost, but he stays asleep, and a second Blizzard takes him down. It's definitely a bummer that Vanilla couldn't contribute much, but his sacrifice allows Jasper to come in for free and take Snorlax down with a couple Rock Smashes. With that, we're finally down to Red's last Pokemon, Charizard. I switch over to Rose, who takes a Flare Blitz and an Air Slash before going for Yawn, but in the end, it isn't even needed. After another Air Slash, Rose unleashes one final Surf to bring Charizard down. With that, Red is defeated, and I have officially completed a hardcore Nuzlocke of Pokémon SoulSilver with only Gen 2 Pokémon. Like I mentioned before, I have a lot of wonderful memories of the original Gen 2 games, and in my opinion, the remakes improve the experience in almost every way. The return to the Kanto region does stretch out a Nuzlocke run, but the final iconic showdown makes it worth the time. And as usual, if you enjoyed the video, please don't hesitate to like, comment, and subscribe to the channel. If you have any suggestions on what kind of challenges you'd like to see in the future, please feel free to drop them in the comments below. I'm actually catching up to the runs I had planned since the start of the channel, so you may start seeing some playthroughs that have been suggested so far in the near future. And with that, thank you for watching, and I hope to see you in the next video.